Okay. So let us start. Today we will cover in meeting 6 the single dimensional array and string. We will get to know what's the meaning of array and how we can use it in programming in Java. It's actually very useful and very strong term and meaning in programming to use array to solve many kind of problems. So it's important for today to understand when we can use array and what different operation you can apply it on your array. For example, this is an example problem that can be solved with array data type. Suppose you have 100 numbers. You want to do the same operations on these 100 numbers. For example, you want to calculate the average of this 100 numbers, and you want to check how many numbers are above the average, what is the maximum value there, or which one is succeed the average number. So suppose this 100 numbers, you want to do multiple operations with them. A regular way, you will do it with for loop. And you will check the operations. For example, if the value there was greater than the average, or you will have a counter and count the numbers, then calculate the average. But the problem here is, will you define 100 variable, for example, to hold each number of them? So it's better to have only one variable referred to this 100 number. So the objectives here is to describe why array are necessary in programming, to declare array reference variable and create array, and highlight the meaning of reference variable. What's the difference between the other type of variables? And to access array elements using indexes. This is how we access the different element inside the array. To declare, create, and initialize an array using array initializer. We have different ways to declare a variable and give it initial values. So you have to understand the different way of how we can declare array variable and how we initialize it. The program common array operations, we will see what can we do on array data type, the different operations we can do it there, and what's the available methods we can apply it on array. To develop and invoke methods with array, so if we want to pass array to a method or we want to return an array from a method. And also we will see the how we can, the most important operations we can do it in array, like search for a specific value inside the array, like to count the numbers there. So we will look for the meaning liner search algorithm, and also to describe the string class, which is can be considered an array of characters. First, let us have the meaning of introducing an array. What's an array? Think of array, this is a specific type, this is an array. So think of an array as a reference variable to a location in the memory, point to the beginning of the array. The array is a sequence space in the memory that holds values from the same data types. So from the example here, for example, we have a reference to a location in the memory, have the name MyList. From MyList, the first position, it's reserved in the memory 10 space in the memory, 10 slots in the memory in sequence. Each slot in the memory will have the double data types here, and we can access each element of these slots by using the indexes of the array. So here the index 0 have the value 5.6. MyList at index 1 have the value 4.5. mylist2 have an index2 have the value 3.3. So suppose we want to access the last element stored in this array, we will access it using the index of mylist, which is the array name, and the index 9. So this actually array element and index 5, 34.33, this is how we can store or retrieve the value from a specific index. Mylist is the array reference variable, which is a name defined by the programmer, and the element values is the value stored inside the memory slots. So to define the array is a data structure that represents a collection of same type of data. We can refer to a location in the memory, give it a name, and store the same data type and sequence on the memory. To define it, we define it in this way. We define the elements type will be stored in this array, double. Then we put the square bracket here to define this is an array. So with the name, then followed by the name of the variables, mylist. So here we actually define a variable with the name mylist as an array to store double data type. This variable equal new slots in the memory with 10 slots that can store double values. So double square bracket variable name equal new double, then the number of elements you want to reserve it to be stored inside this array. What's the difference between array data type, which is a reference type in the memory, and between the primitive type, like Boolean, byte, character, short, integer, long, float, double? All this data type is called primitive type. This means if we create a variable with Boolean data type, then the value will be stored in a specific memory location. If we want to store a value, we store it in this location. If we want to retrieve it, we retrieve the location. We retrieve the value from the location. Okay. So what's the reference type? The reference type is actually a pointer to a location in the memory where has the beginning of the variables. Then there is a sequence of memory slots that you can access each element after that reference. So here, Java types divided into primitive type and reference type. Primitive types like what we already had as a variable type, Boolean, byte, character, short, integer, long, float, and double. The big differences between the primitive and reference type is how they are stored in the memory. Primitive type variable usually store in a specific location in the memory. The value of this variable should be from the data types defined for this variable from the declared type, and the value can be accessed directly from that memory location. You can store, you can retrieve the value from that memory location directly. Like if you said integer number equal new integer, or integer number equal 10. So 10 will be stored inside this variable in a specific memory location. You can access it by calling the name of the variable. All non-primitive type are called reference type. Usually they are classes. We have string data type, scanner, and array from the type reference type. As we said, the big differences between them is how they are stored in the memory. Because a reference type variable or a reference to a location in the memory we use this reference to store in allocation and memory the address. So the address will be stored, not the value, not like the primitive type. So in the reference, we store the address. In the primitive, we store the value. For the reference variable, we store the address, the location of this object in the computer memory, the reserved address. Such a variable is said to refer to an object in the program. So it's actually referring to where is it stored in the memory, in which address is it stored, and not to the values. We have here two diagrams. We will describe the differences between the primitive and reference data type. Here we have integer a equal 10. So we have in the computer memory a location given the name A, and we will store the value 10 there. If we have string S, which is a reference data type, then for S, we will have the location or the address of memory that will store the value of S. So S will hold the address, and the address here 2307, which is this one, have the value of the string, which is hello, the value here. This will be the same if you said new string hello. Okay, this is a similar diagram. So A will have the value where S will have the address that that point to the value stored for S, okay, which is 2307. What will happen after executing the following statement? Integer B equal A. So B here will have the same value of A. So A have 10, B will have 10. We assign the value directly. But if we have a string T and we want to assign it the value of S, then it will have the address where S pointing to. So S storing the address 2307 and T also will point to the same address. So here A have 10. If I said B equal A, then B will equal the value of A, which is 10. If I have S pointing to the address of hello string, then I said T equal S, then T also will point to the same location where S is pointing to. This is the difference between if you have a primitive data type or reference data type. The primitive will store the value where the reference will store the location of the value. How we declare it? We declare it in this way. We said which data type you want to store it in this array. Then you will put the square bracket. Then you will put the name of the array. For example, you can say double square bracket, then my list. This will create a my list array, and the allowed values to be stored are double. We can also say data type, then the name of the variables, then we place the curly, the square bracket. This is allowed but not preferred. For example, we can say double my list, then the square bracket. We have more than one option to define an array variable. How we can create an array? Also, we can say the array name equal new, then the data type of the array, for example, new double, then the array size, how many elements you want to reserve for this array. For example, you can say my list equal new double with 10 memory location. Then you can access each element of this array my list using the index to store the value or retrieve the value. So you can say my list in the position 0, which is referred to the first element in the array, equal 10, or my list in the position of 9, which is referred to the last element in the array, equal this value. You can also declare and create the array in one step, like this way. You will say the data type of the array, then the square bracket, then the name of the array equal a new data type array size, which data type you want to store in this array, then the size of the array. Or, for example, you can say here, create an array with the name mylist of double data type, which is a new double 10 of size 10. Or you can say double mylist square bracket equal new double of 10. So we have here the two options of how you can create an array. The length of array is actually how many elements are there in the array. Once you create the array, the size of it will be fixed. You cannot change it. You can retrieve the value of, retrieve the length of the array using the length method. Like mylist.length will return how many elements are stored in the mylist array. And this will return 10, which is the how many elements are there. When an array is created, its elements are assigned the default value. So what's the default value of an array? If we storing primitive data type in the array, then the default value for its element will be 0. If it was character, the space, I think, will be there, which is this value. If it's Boolean, it will be false data type. Indexed variable. As we said, we can access each element in the array using the indexes, which is starting always from 0 and end at the length of the array minus 1. So this 0 will be the first element in the array. Then the array length minus 1 will be the last element in the array. In our example, mylist hold double values. Index has from 0 to 9 because it has 10 elements. So start from 0 and end at 9 index. Each element in the array is represented using the following syntax. How we can use the index to access a value in the array. We will put the name of the array, then the index inside a square bracket. Index variable can be used in the same way as a regular variable. So you can deal with index variable as normal way as a primitive variable. For example, you can say mylist at index 2 equal mylist at index 0 plus mylist at equal 1. This will get the value at 0 index and 1 index, add them together and store them in index 2, mylist and index 2. Array can be declared, create, and initialize in one step also, like this way. So after defining the data type stored in this array, the name of the array, you will put the elements of the array inside the curly bracket in this way, 1.9, 2.9, 3.4, and you will separate the values of this array with symbol comma. It's the same if you said here. So here we define the array directly and give it the initial values. It's the same if you put this one single statement in 5 statement in this way. You create the variable, you give it the length of 4 element, a new double of 4, then store at index 0 the value 1.9, which is this one, 1.9, or mylist at index 1 store the value 2.9, mylist index 2 3.4, mylist at index 3 equal 3.5. 3.5. So it's the same if you said mylist equal 1.9 comma 2.9 comma 3.4 comma 3.5 comma. So this will be index 0, index 1, index 2, and index 3. It's the same. This can be in one statement. Splitting it would cause a syntax error. So this one, if you want to split it like this one, you define the array of double data type but you didn't reserve the length of the array here, then you give it initializing. This will cause an assign text error. So this is not correct. Either you combine it together in one statement, or you define it in this way. You give it the size, then you assign the values of each indexes, or you define the array immediately and give it initialize value. How we could trace an array? We have here an array A to hold integer data type. Its size 3. So we will have A array pointing to a location memory with 3 spaces, 0, 1, 2. Okay, for 3 elements. Integer B equal new integer of 5. This will create a variable B, store the location of B array with reserved 5 location memory. So starting from 0 and ending at 4. This is the first 2 sentences. Then we will start storing the different values in the array. A at index 0 will equal 3. So A at the first initial values will be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 as initial values for integers data type. Then A at index 0 will equal 3. This will change the value in A 0 to 3. So 0 will be changed to 3. What is 0? 0 is the initial values for the integers value of an array. Then A at 1 equal A at 0 plus 2. A at 0 have the value 3. So if you use the index here, you actually using the value. If you're using only the name of the array, then it's using the indexes. A at 0, which is have the value 3 plus 2 is equal to 5. 5 will be stored in A1. Then A2 plus plus, A2 was having the value 0. Then plus plus, it will change the value. It's like 0 plus 1. So this will be 1. This is the second step here, A2. Okay. Then we have a primitive data type, integer x, and have the value of A at 2. A at 2 is actually 1, so x will have 1. Integer y, this will create a memory location with the name y, equal the value of A2 which is 1, minus 1, so 0. Y will have the value 0. Integer z, memory location with the name z, equal A at the index 2 minus 1. So index 2 minus 1, which is A at 1. A at 1 have the value 5. This means Z will have the value 5. Integer W, this is W, equal A at index 2, which is 1, minus minus, this will change the value to 0. So W will have the value 1 before changing. So A at index 2, which is 1, use the value 1, then decrement it by 1. So it's like 1 minus 1 equals 0. So we will use the value of W before we change it to 0. So W will have the value 1. Then A equal B. A equal B, this means let A reference to B array. A dot length minus 1 plus 1, 1. This means now A pointing to the same memory, the same array location of B. So if I said A dot length minus 1, now A is changed to here. So B was actually 5. So A dot length minus 1, which is the last element incremented by 1, this will be changed the value to 1. And this example now, the reference to A array are no more exist.